I work at a hotel in Munich, right near Marienplatz. Last Tuesday, an American couple checked in around 3 p.m. The man asked what time breakfast was. I told him 7 to 10 a.m. He smiled and said, "Great. We'll probably come down around 10:15. We like to sleep in." I explained that breakfast ends at 10, not 10:15, not 10:05. At 10 a.m., the buffet closes. He laughed like I was joking. "Come on, we're paying customers. You can leave some food out for us." I told him that's not how it works. If you notice how one sentence here explains entire national psychologies. Welcome. I track these cultural code clashes full-time, so you don't have to. Subscribe, not to support me, but to keep decoding the invisible software behind human behavior. The kitchen staff leaves at 10. The food is cleared at 10. If he wants breakfast, he needs to arrive before 10 a.m. He stared at me for a solid 5 seconds. Then he said, "Wow, okay. I guess customer service isn't a thing here." I told him customer service means I'm being clear about breakfast hours so he doesn't miss it. He asked if I was always this rude to guests. His wife suggested they just set an alarm. He turned to her and said, "We're on vacation, honey. We shouldn't have to follow their schedule." I reminded him he's staying at a hotel, not renting a house. Hotels have breakfast hours. He wanted to know if we could make an exception for Americans since we're used to different service standards. I told him German hotels have the same rules for everyone. He muttered something about German efficiency being overrated. They missed breakfast 3 times that week. On the 4th day, he asked if we'd consider adding an American-style breakfast option with flexible hours. We've been operating this way since 1987. Last month, a woman from California asked for directions to the train station. I pointed and said, "Straight down this street, 5 minutes." She said, "Oh, so like 10 minutes." I said, "No, 5 minutes." She insisted that when Europeans say 5 minutes, they mean 10. I told her I meant 5 minutes because it takes 5 minutes. She walked away saying I was being defensive. A guy at the bakery asked if the pretzel was fresh. The baker said it was baked 4 hours ago. The guy asked, "So is that a yes or no?" The baker repeated, 4 hours ago. The guy complained to his friend that Germans never give straight answers, and that was just Tuesday. I teach English at a language school in Berlin, mostly adult learners. We do conversation practice where I correct pronunciation and grammar. Standard teaching. One day, an American woman joined the B2 level class. She introduced herself and said she was excited to improve her German. Great attitude. 15 minutes in, she mispronounced wichtig as wichtig. I corrected her. Wichtig, with the ch sound from the back of your throat. She nodded and continued. 3 sentences later, same mistake. I stopped her again. The chi needs to be harder. Try wichtig. She said okay, but looked uncomfortable. After class, she pulled me aside. She said I was calling her out in front of everyone and it was embarrassing. I explained that's how language correction works. If I don't correct mistakes immediately, they become habits. She said in America, teachers use something called a compliment sandwich, where you say something nice, then the correction, then something encouraging. I told her that takes 3 times as long, and this is a German class in Germany. This is the level of cultural logic versus emotion wiring I unpack every week. How politeness can sabotage clarity, and how systems shape empathy. Most people scroll past this kind of nuance. You don't. That's why you'll fit here. She said I could at least be nicer about it. The next week, she asked if I could write her corrections down instead of saying them out loud. I said no, because pronunciation can't be learned from written notes. She needed to hear the correction and practice it immediately. She said I was being inflexible. I told her inflexibility is correcting the same mistake 20 times because I was too polite to be clear the first time. She asked if German teachers received training in student emotional support. I told her we received training in teaching German efficiently. She stopped coming to class. Her friend told me she found an American teacher who was more supportive. That teacher lets her say wichtig without correction. A colleague from Texas started working at our office in Hamburg. First week, he gave a presentation about his marketing ideas. After he finished, our boss said, "That won't work for the German market." Just like that. Direct statement. My colleague smiled nervously and said, "Okay, well, what did you like about it?" The boss said, "Nothing. It won't work. Next topic." My colleague sat down looking confused. After the meeting, he asked if the boss was mad at him. I said no, he was just being clear. The ideas wouldn't work, so he said they wouldn't work. My colleague said that, in America, you'd at least acknowledge the effort. Say something like, "I appreciate the creativity, but we need to take a different direction." I asked why we should appreciate creativity that leads nowhere. He said it's about morale and team building. I told him wasting time on failed ideas kills morale. He said I sounded exactly like the boss. 3 months later, he was still asking people if they were upset with him. They weren't. They were just German. I work at a restaurant in Frankfurt. An American family came in and ordered schnitzel. When I brought it out, the father took one bite and said, "This is good." I said thank you and walked away. He called me back. I said it was good. "Don't you want to know more?" I asked if there was a problem. He said no. The food was great. He was giving me a compliment. I thanked him again. He looked annoyed. In America, servers usually ask follow-up questions, like, "How's everything tasting? Can I get you anything else? You're just standing there." I told him everything seemed fine, and I didn't want to interrupt his meal. He said I wasn't interrupting, I was engaging. I asked if he needed anything. He said no. I left. He gave me a 2-star review online saying the service was cold and unwelcoming, even though the food was decent. The review mentioned I didn't smile enough. I wasn't aware smiling was part of the job description. The food was correct, the bill was accurate, and I brought everything on time. He wanted me to pretend we were friends. I'm a cashier at an etiquette in Cologne. Last summer, an American woman started shopping at our store regularly. Every time she came through my line, she'd say, "Hey, how are you?" in this bright, cheerful voice. The first time I said, "Fine." She looked disappointed. The second time I said, "Good. And you?" She seemed happier. The third time, I was actually having a bad day. My bike tire was flat. I'd been on my feet for 6 hours, and my break was delayed. So when she asked how I was, I told her. I said I was tired because of the long shift and annoyed about my bike. She froze, completely stopped moving. Then she said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." I didn't understand why she was apologizing. I was just answering her question. She said, "No, I was just being polite. I didn't expect." She trailed off. I asked if she wanted to know how I was or not. She said in America, "How are you?" is just a greeting. You're supposed to say fine or good, even if you're not. I asked what the point was of asking a question if you don't want the answer. She said it's just being friendly. I told her that lying about your feelings isn't friendly. It's confusing. She started saying hello instead of how are you after that. I found it much more efficient. A guy from Chicago joined our running club in Dusseldorf. After the first group run, we all went for coffee. He was telling a long story about his marathon training. Halfway through, one of the German guys interrupted and said, "That training plan won't work." Your weekly mileage is too inconsistent. The American stopped talking. He said, I wasn't asking for advice. The German said, I know, but you're making a mistake. The American looked around the table like he was expecting someone to defend him. No one did. We were all thinking the same thing. He turned back to the German guy and said, maybe let people finish their stories before you criticize them. The German said he wasn't criticizing, he was correcting. There's a difference. The American said, in America, we let people share their experiences without jumping in to tell them they're wrong. The German asked, even when they are wrong? The American said, yes, because it's rude. Another club member said, what's ruder? Telling someone the truth immediately or letting them fail and saying nothing? The American didn't come back for 3 weeks. When he did, his training plan was better. He never acknowledged the advice helped. But his half-marathon time improved by 8 minutes. I'm a tour guide in Heidelberg. I do walking tours of the old town and castle. Last spring, an American woman booked a private tour. She was very chatty, asking lots of questions. At one point, she said, you must love living in such a beautiful city. Okay, I told her it's fine, but housing is expensive and parking is terrible. She laughed. I didn't. She stopped laughing and said, wait, you're serious? I said yes. Heidelberg has significant infrastructure problems. She said, but it's so charming. I told her charm doesn't fix traffic congestion. She got quiet after that. An hour later, she asked if I liked being a tour guide. I said it pays the bills, but I'd rather work in museum curation. She seemed shocked. You're supposed to say you love it. I asked why I would lie about my career goals. She said because it's more pleasant for the customer. I told her she asked a question, and I answered honestly. If she wanted pleasant lies, she should have specified. She said I was the first tour guide who'd ever been so blunt. I asked if the other guides actually loved their jobs or if they were just better liars. She didn't answer. At the end, she left a 3-star review saying I was knowledgeable but lacked enthusiasm. I provided accurate historical information and showed up on time. Enthusiasm wasn't in the booking description. An American exchange student joined our university seminar in Leipzig. The professor assigned a paper and the student submitted it 2 days late. The professor marked it down 2 grades for tardiness. The student asked if he could resubmit it. The professor said no. The student said he'd had a busy week. The professor said that wasn't relevant. The student said in America, professors usually accept late work if you have a good reason. The professor asked what the reason was. The student said he was adjusting to a new country. The professor asked if he'd known about the deadline. Yes. Was he physically capable of writing the paper on time? Yes. Then there was no valid reason. The student said the professor was being unfair. The professor said fairness means applying the same rules to everyone, which is exactly what he was doing. The student asked if German universities cared about student well-being. The professor said student well-being isn't graded. Academic performance is. The students submitted every paper on time after that. Sometimes directness is educational. I work at a pharmacy in Stuttgart. 2 months ago, an American man came in asking for something for his headache. I asked if he wanted ibuprofen or paracetamol. He said, "What do you think?" I said I think he should decide because it's his headache. He said he was asking for my professional recommendation. I said both work for headaches. Ibuprofen is better for inflammation. Paracetamol is gentler on the stomach. He said, "Okay, but which one should I get?" I told him that depends on whether his stomach is sensitive. He said he didn't know. I suggested he think about whether he usually has stomach problems after taking medication. He looked frustrated. "Can't you just tell me which one to buy?" I explained that I can give him information, but I can't make medical decisions for him. That's not legal or ethical. He said in America, the pharmacist would just recommend one. I told him that in Germany, we provide information so patients make informed choices. He said I was making this way too complicated. I was literally offering him two options. He stood there for a minute, then said, "Fine, I'll take the ibuprofen." I grabbed it from the shelf. He said, "Wait, are you sure that's the right one?" I reminded him that he just chose it. He said, "Yeah, but you're the expert. Do you agree with my choice?" I said it's a reasonable choice for a headache. He said, "That's not a yes." I told him yes, ibuprofen will help his headache. He paid and left. 5 minutes later, he came back. He said, "I changed my mind. I want the other one." I asked if he was having stomach issues. He said no, he just felt like the paracetamol might be better. I swapped them and processed a return. He looked at the box and said, "Actually, now I'm second-guessing again. Which one do people usually buy?" I told him about 50% buy each. He asked which one I would take. I said I don't get headaches often, but when I do, I take ibuprofen because I don't have stomach sensitivity. He said, "Perfect. I'll stick with the ibuprofen then." I'd already given him the paracetamol. He made me swap them again. Then he asked if I thought he was being difficult. I said yes. He looked stunned. "You could have just said no." I asked why I would lie when he specifically asked for my opinion. He said most people would be polite. I told him I was being polite by being honest instead of wasting more of his time. He said German directness was a lot to handle. I told him indecisiveness was also a lot to handle. He bought the ibuprofen. I have no idea if he actually took it. Somewhere right now, an American is asking a German if they're upset, and the German is saying no for the third time, which the American will interpret as definitely yes. If you made it here, you already think in systems, not stereotypes. That's what this channel is built for. Precision over performance. Subscribing doesn't help me. It helps you stay 3 moves ahead in understanding how people actually operate.